Having your plans ruined by a canceled or delayed flight is super frustrating. And as a passenger, there are specific situations where the airline owes you big time. So in this video, we're diving into the chaos of canceled and delayed flights. Whether you're just trying to get to your destination as fast as possible, or you want to ensure you get your money back, this is the video for you. I'll talk you through the immediate steps to take if your flight is delayed or canceled, strategies for rebooking, and how to get every last penny you're owed. Speaking of which, you have rights. First of all, in regard to cancellations. In the USA, the Department of Transportation guarantees that if an airline cancels your flight for any reason, you have the option for a full cash refund, even if you purchased a non-refundable ticket. They're not usually going to lead with this, okay? They're usually going to attempt to book you on a different flight, which you might want, or they might try to give you a voucher. But if you're in the USA and your flight is canceled for any reason, you have the option for a full refund. Now note, I said option. You can also be rebooked on a different flight. They owe you that if that's what you want. Sometimes even a more expensive flight at no extra charge. And in that case, of course, there'd be no refund involved. But many people don't know this and they just take what they get.
We interrupt this program to bring you
news. Hey everyone, Nick from the future here with some very timely news relevant to canceled and delayed flights. So we've had this video ready to publish for weeks, but the US Department of Transportation just announced major updates that are really good for consumers faced with cancellations and delays. So I wanted to slot it in. This applies to you if you're flying to, from, or within the United States. Under the new regulations, you are entitled to an automatic full cash refund if your flight is canceled or has a significant change and you're not interested in the alternative transportation or compensation options. So what is different about this than what I was just explaining to you? The biggest news is that the payment has to be automatic, it has to be prompt, and it has to be cash or your original form of payment. Refunds have to be issued within 7 business days for credit card purchases and within 20 days for other methods. It also has to be full, meaning including taxes and fees, minus the value of any portion of the transportation that you already used. What all of this means is airlines have to make it easy for you to get your money back without you having to explicitly request it or jump through a whole bunch of hoops. Now, a couple of other important things to know. This regulation defines significant change. The lack of official definition of a lot of these terms is one of the things that has made all of this so hard for consumers because they differ from airline to airline. For domestic flights, a significant change is any shift in your departure or arrival time by more than 3 hours. And for international flights, it's 6 hours. Other significant changes are a switch in airports, an increase in the number of connections, a downgrade in your class of service, or changes affecting accessibility for passengers with disabilities. And it gets even better. Airlines now also have to refund checked bag fees for significantly delayed baggage and service fees for extra services you paid for but weren't provided. For example, Wi-Fi or selected seats. All of this is great news for consumers. What's that? If you hit the like button on this video, I will personally find your checked luggage and hand deliver it to you. I'm just kidding, but seriously. This regulation is set to take effect later this year. Comment DOT if you'd like me to give an update when things roll out. Now, keep watching because this regulation only applies to the USA, remember? So now let's talk about rights in Europe. And then I'll break down how to get the airlines to pay you for other things like meals, hotels, etc. For those traveling to, from, or within Europe, the European Union has a flight compensation regulation called EU 261 that entitles passengers up to 600 euros depending on flight distance for cancellation. This only applies if you were informed less than 14 days prior. EU 261 gives you the right to compensation towards flights, meals, and hotels. You can check out the EU's official website to select what most applies to your situation and claim your rights then and there. So if you're headed to Europe on a European carrier, this one's for you. These are your basic rights in regards to the flights themselves. We're going to talk about how to get the airline to give you money for other things a little bit later. But if you're watching this video right now and you're faced with a cancellation, you need to be ready to take action. So what happens when your flight is canceled? If you don't have it already, I recommend using your airline's app. This varies by airline, of course, but in many cases when your flight is canceled, you might be presented the option to simply rebook on the next available flight right there in the app. If not, you'll want to get in touch with the airline's customer service right away. If you're at an airport with a customer service desk for your specific airline, head that way. But I'd also pick up the phone and dial customer service. A tip I picked up from the points guy is to call one of the international numbers instead of the US number for way shorter wait times. So for example, I might call the Canada customer service line instead. They're going to speak English and you're probably not going to have to wait as long. I'd also be trying to figure out what new flight you want to be on your way to the customer service desk. If you go in with a plan and you could say, hey, we were trying to get to Seattle. This flight was canceled. I see there's another one leaving at 4:15 p.m. Could you put us on that one? You're likely to get what you want. And if you don't see what you need with your airline, partner airlines could be a possibility too. I've had this happen before where a flight was delayed long enough that we ended up missing our connecting flight. And by the time we landed, the airline had already booked us on a new flight with a different airline so that we still made it to our destination within a reasonable time frame. So, for example, if you booked an American Airlines flight that doesn't work for you anymore, find out if JetBlue or Alaska Airlines has any deals that you could take advantage of. They could be your backup plan to save time and headaches. Now, one thing to look out for. This is actually an area where flying with major carriers is better than flying with a budget carrier. I've talked a lot about budget airlines on this channel, and trust me, I love taking a $40 Allegiant flight or a $17 Ryanair flight to save money. But in many cases, there's only one Allegiant flight taking the route you need that day. You may just be out of luck until the next day that flight runs. Versus a United Airlines who's running 6 of that exact flight or has a big enough network to get you to your destination via a different connection. Trade-offs, pros and cons, right? But that's one thing you get when you book with a major carrier. So what if the flight canceled was a connecting flight, or you were significantly delayed? Something that would keep you stuck for a while. How could you make your unexpected stay in the airport or that city more comfortable? We talked about rights in regards to your flights, but it's also important to know how the airline should compensate you for situations like this one. So real quick, as you walk into any of these conversations, I want to recommend be assertive. Don't be afraid to be assertive, but be kind, right? Be outrageously polite and winsome, and don't be afraid to ask, but don't be a jerk. Now, when it comes to cancellations and delays, there's a difference between what airlines call controllable and non-controllable situations. Controllable situations basically exclude weather-related events. You can check out flightrights.gov for a full grid of the customer service commitments by US airline. But in general, if your flight is delayed or canceled and it results in you waiting 3 hours or more, you're entitled to a meal voucher. If you're stuck overnight, you're entitled to meals, a hotel, and ground transportation to and from the hotel. Remember, in general, if the delay or cancellation was not in the airline's control and inclement weather is the usual culprit here, in the USA, there is no requirement to give you these things. However, I would still ask. Once again, speed is of the essence here. If you know that you're stuck overnight and the airline can't help you, book a hotel as soon as you can because you're going to be competing with other passengers for those same rooms. There's countless stories of passengers who found themselves stuck, try to book a hotel, only to find out that they're all full. So if you want to avoid sleeping on the floor of the airport, speed, absolutely of the essence. If you're stuck and you really need to get home, sometimes it makes sense not to wait and to just take on the cost of getting home yourself, either by some other means of transportation or by booking yourself on a different flight. An example, let's say the airline can't get you home for another 24 hours, but you see flights available on some other carrier that could get you home today. If they won't or can't book you on that flight, you could ask for the full refund, at least recouping your cost there, and then pay whatever it costs to get yourself home. And in this case, you want to make sure to keep great record and documentation. Every email and text from the airline, all the receipts for the meals, the hotels, the taxis, the rental car, etc. This is going to come in especially handy if you decide to pursue compensation for expenses you incurred as a result of the delay or cancellation. Hey, me again. Honestly, we aren't sure yet how the new changes may affect this part of things, but in my opinion, it's always wise, it can't hurt to keep good documentation. If you feel intimidated taking on the airline by yourself and you need help filing your compensation claims, I've heard good things about websites like AirHelp and Claim Compass, which negotiate with the airline on your behalf to get you compensated. The downside is that they do take a cut, which I think is around 20%. If you have a travel insurance policy and you want to make a claim, you'll need to review the fine print of your exact policy to know if you're covered, but listen, this is where you're going to need the documentation. Without documentation, you have zero hopes. Now, one more consideration. If you booked your trip with a good travel rewards credit card, you might also be covered there because many of them have trip delay and trip cancellation protections built in. Many of them also offer free lounge access, which is a great way to make your delay more comfortable, and in my experience, with much better food and drink. If you're interested in learning more about travel rewards credit cards, check out this video right here, where I break down some of my favorites. Thank you so much for watching. Happy travels.